Now we'd like to welcome Chris Harrison on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon University, who's going to tell us briefly about the exciting research that he's doing.
Okay. Is the mic on? Yeah? Okay. So, very pleased to be here. I wanted to show you some quick research that we're doing at my lab at Carnegie Mellon. I run what's called the Future Interfaces Group. We're in a group that's exploring sort of the frontiers of human-computer interaction. You can broadly think of it as sort of combining three different areas of research. Okay. Basically, we're talking about sort of the sensors and signals. We're combining that with often physical fabrication, so we're trying to prototype the future by looking at sort of new form factors for computing. I'm going to show you an example today. And finally, to make sense of those sort of signals and sensor data, is we use techniques like machine learning and computer vision and broadly sort of AI to power those underlying interactions. So sort of the group's premise for a lot of our research is this notion of computing has become very small. So if it's a very small device, obviously it's hard to use. So how do you kind of tap that potential by thinking about using small computers, but in big and powerful ways? So I wanted to kind of ground my presentation, as many things here in Pittsburgh have sort of this tradition and this history, is actually to go back to a really old device, the light bulb. The incandescent light bulb really began manufacturing at a commercial level in about the 1880s out of the Edison Electric Light Company. And this has been a remarkably successful device. We see them everywhere. There's lights in pretty much every single room that you can think of. So this truly is something that has escaped out from the lab and is now in popular use and has totally transformed how we work, how we socialize, when we go to bed, and so on. So this is something that we want to capitalize on. The other remarkable thing about it is that there's an incredible infrastructure that underlies electric lighting, right? Is that you flip this switch and light comes out, but you don't think about the incredible infrastructure that underlies it. So there's a power plant, there's transmission lines, there's people maintaining it. We just think of it as a utility, but this is a really powerful metaphor. But what's interesting about the light bulb is, even though it's been out for about 130 years as a state-of-the-art technology, it really hasn't evolved. The technology may have evolved. We've gone from incandescent lights to CFLs to maybe LEDs. So the underlying technology, again, has changed, but the function really hasn't. So how we generate the photons has changed, but we're still just kind of kicking out photons into our world. And so you can think about how you might go about reinventing the light bulb with all these advances in computing. So instead of just thinking of it as only a light bulb, can we turn it into a computational appliance and draw some of the amazing technology progress that we've made in the past 50 years and actually kind of reapply it to this venerable light bulb? So as you can see here, what we have in this sort of metaphor is you have on the left, you have a light. You have a piece of paper on your desktop, it illuminates it. But on the right, you might have this notion of an info bulb. So not only does it emit light, still a killer app, we want to keep that feature, but instead you can also project interactivity out onto the environment. So not only can you see your piece of paper, but you can also augment that experience. So you can imagine taking out sort of the light that's in your desk lamp right now and screwing in one of these info bulbs. So now it can see everything on your desk. So it can still illuminate your papers, but you can also do things like Google search and check your spelling. If you're doing math, it can double check that for you. Launch contacts right on your desk that might have relevant information to your expertise that you're looking at. Same for books and so on. So we can actually physically augment the media. It's not that we're replacing your desk with a $10,000 multi-touch screen. Instead, we're using your traditional desk, and you've put in maybe a $1,000 or $300 light bulb, and we're augmenting that table. And you can imagine sort of the same thing happening in kitchens as well. So you can imagine replacing the kind of recessed lights in your kitchen, 4 or 5 of them in your kitchen, and now your kitchen, for all practical purposes, is a computer. So the countertops would be fully multi-touch, and you could bring up applications to either entertain you while you're cooking dinner, and recipe helpers, and so on. So a model that's been really successful that we want to borrow from the smartphone world is apps, an app store, right? So what made smartphones were really nifty, very cool appliance, kind of devices. But what really unlocked their potential was the apps. You let creative developers loose on these platforms, and they came up with all sorts of interesting ideas. What we want to do is release this notion of sort of an app market, but on your world being a computer instead. So what kind of apps would you want to download to your kitchen, or your office desk, or your living room, and so on? So right now, this notion of computing, the computing era that we're in right now, is very much that we're sort of sprinkling all these little rectangular displays around our environment. We have our laptop and our smartphone and maybe a smartwatch, and we have a TV in our living room. So computing all exists inside these little rectangles. What we want to really do with this model is have computing be like a utility, be like the light bulb, just be in the ether of our environments, augmenting our daily activities. So here is actually our prototype from about 5 years ago. Nothing very special. It's a projector, and on top of that, we've literally like hot glue to connect onto the top of it. So there's nothing too fancy here, but this is where we were. And this is what that system could do. We pushed on the software end of things because we knew the hardware would miniaturize. So what you can see here, this is one of my graduate students. He wrote a little app for his office at Carnegie Mellon that lets him literally paint interactivity onto the walls. The whole room is a multi-touch computer. The whole room is a computer. And in this case, he's written a little app that lets him set the away message so others can see in his office. So the wall now has a series of buttons. This is just an app that he wrote as a test. So a year later, we made a new version, smaller. Hardware had gone smaller. This is inside of a lampshade now. This is what it looks like. So again, you're seeing a projector and a depth camera. But here's where we are right now. So this actually has, for the first time, this light bulb screw base. There's still wires coming out for debugging purposes. We're not quite there yet. But this is something very soon. In the next few years, you will buy an Android-powered light bulb that you will be able to just simply screw into an existing socket, and then on that desktop, you will have an interactive computing experience. So here's what it looks like now. Here's our finger tracking algorithm. This is just shot from the lab. Our technique for finger tracking is shown in green. You can see that there's still a little bit of latency, but actually the spatial accuracy is quite good. And actually there's some competing techniques that we're rendering in different colors that are also considered state-of-the-art. But I think you can see we substantially advanced past those methods. And once you get this sort of basic multi-touch working, this is the sort of things that you can happen in your environment. So here we've launched a number keypad. We can start doing cute things like snapping. So we can actually snap that number keypad to the side of your laptop. And if you move your laptop, it should follow. You'll see that it's just running. The apps don't know they're running on your desk. They think they're running on an iPad. They don't know that they're running on your couch or on your refrigerator. So they just respond as they would normally. We have to deal with this case, though, that once you're running in the environment, people can put things down onto interfaces. So if I put a mug down on my number keypad, I don't want it to type into my spreadsheet. So you have to actually escape from other objects, but you don't want it to escape from people's hands, obviously, because people want to still do input. So all this sort of usual resizing and dragging and moving, sort of like the desktop metaphor we have in computing, but now it's back to the original actual desktop itself. So here is just a regular, multi-touch interface. So this is not as futuristic as you might imagine. We're getting actually very, very close. So returning to sort of my initial example here of the light switch, this is where we want computing to be. It isn't just going to be a little tiny, screen sitting on your desk. We want it to exist much like lighting is today, augmenting our everyday experiences. And we're getting tangibly close to thinking about computing fading into the background, very much like light switches have for lighting. Instead, now in the future, or very close to, just a few years away, hopefully, you'll be flicking on that light switch. It'll still look like your regular apartment or your regular kitchen, but when you perform that gesture, you'll be able to summon kind of extraordinary interactive capabilities right on your environment. Okay, I think maybe we have time for one question, maybe. Thank you. If not, someone can grab me at the break.
Do you see a future of using this with not being actually projected, using augmented reality to do this instead?
Yeah, that's the other approach. I mean, in some respects, augmented reality, where you have the screen sort of sitting in front of your eye, could provide a very similar experience, except it's sort of mediated. I'm not generally a huge fan of sort of wearing things on my face. That may change. It's very much a fashion statement. I mean, the fact is I am wearing an assistive technology on my face, my glasses, and no one's looking at me like I'm totally insane. So it's actually very much a matter of sort of fashion in society, if that'll become acceptable. But obviously, if it's an experience that's on your face, it's sort of hard to share. So there's sort of this discoverability issue of the interaction. So it's sort of, if you remember when Bluetooth headsets were very common, 5 or 10 years ago, I was living in New York City at the time, is you sort of always saw the person that you thought was insane because they're talking to themselves on the sidewalk. So as the future of AR, sort of people will just be clawing into the air, and we'll have no idea that they're really like playing like Fruit Ninja or something. So I think there's actually benefits of actually being embedded in the world, and projection has that affordance. But I think it's an open question, and we'll see where the technology goes. One more very quick question.
Are you looking at bulbs that could project 365, up, down, left, right, center?
That would be great. The biggest thing is actually projector technology. To be able to project that many lumens at that resolution out is actually pretty challenging. So right now, even an HD projector, once you get more than about 10 feet of projection, you start getting pixels that are pretty sizable. So we are going to have to wait for technology to catch up with this vision, but at least we can sort of prototype what it'll feel like with today's technology. Okay, thank you guys.